who's a historian at Nanterre University near Paris, a specialist in American social movements and the author of Black America, History of Struggles for Justice and Equality. Some of the issues touched on in that report there. How divisive has this election been?
It's been incredibly divisive. This is, in that sense, it is a historic election that has really been touching on this growing polarization of the American nation, and it's dividing the entire country into regions. We have an enormous gender gap, and we have an enormous racial gap that has never been so vivid in my opinion. So this is one of the key stakes of this election, is to determine basically what the minority turnout is going to be. Obviously, African Americans have been voted at an extremely historic high level for Obama in 2008 and 2012, and there has been some questions about a possible drop in their turnout for this election because of a lack of support for Hillary Clinton. And this is really one of the major stakes. Now, being a historian, I always like to think back in time a little bit, and it's important to see that the Black voter participation has steadily increased since 1996, but it came from only 40%. When Bill Clinton was re-elected, it was only 40%. It reached a high in 2008 of 69%, and now we're wondering what it's going to be today. And this is a key element, I think, of the campaign and the election, the capacity for Hillary Clinton to be able to mobilize massively the African American community, this community that has been so antagonized by so many of Donald Trump's declarations in the past. We have many that come back to our minds, and the most famous one, or infamous one really, is when he declared that African Americans were living today in the worst situation ever, historically.
Do you see this as a division which will persist? If Trump is defeated, will things calm down?
I don't think things are going to calm down at all. I think I'm actually quite pessimistic about what's going to happen after the result of the election comes out. The division is so deep in so many ways, as I said, that it's not going to disappear. And I don't envision that Trump's going to, even if he loses, it's going to concede so easily. And if he does lose and Hillary Clinton is elected, then it's going to be the whole question of what is she going to be able to do. And I'm not sure she's going to be able to be a president that has the political means to be the president for all Americans. The divisions are way too deep.
Okay, we're going to go very quickly to Josh Kraushaar now, political editor of the National Journal, who pens the weekly column Against the Grain. He's in Washington. How divided is America right now?
Well, we are a polarized country. The early exit polls that have come out within the last hour suggest that we're about as polarized by race and education level as we've been in many, many years. But after tonight, the big question is how will both Clinton and Trump respond to the election results? And if Trump doesn't prevail, will he concede? Will he acknowledge that Hillary Clinton wins if she ends up ahead and when all the votes are counted?
Do you believe any of Mr. Trump's bluster as to what he might do should he lose the election?
Well, Trump always likes to say one thing, but the actions don't necessarily follow suit. So, what I think is more likely is the threat of some lawsuits. If we do see some very close states, North Carolina is a state that's shaping up to be highly competitive. Nevada is a state that's also competitive, and there were some issues the Trump campaign raised with people voting after people being in line, at least after after the polls had closed there. You could have some threats of lawsuits. I ultimately think that if Trump does not come close, it's going to be hard for him to really hold off and not concede this election.
Josh Kraushaar, thanks very much for joining us. You're watching special coverage of the US presidential election here on France 24. We're going to take a very short break, after which we'll be back with the latest from America.
What do you want from your news website? France24.com, giving you easier access to information and faster for a unique experience. France24.com, the international news website.
France 24's coverage of the American presidential election will be right back with updated results, analysis and what's going on behind the scenes. Stay with us on France 24 and France24.com.
Welcome back to our special coverage of the US presidential election here on France 24. We should be able to start this section by crossing straight to the United States, Virginia specifically, and Francois Picard. Francois, what have you got for us?
Well, I'm in a polling station in Northern Virginia in Falls Church at the Bailey Elementary School. And Chris, it must have been 2 hours ago that they smashed the record for turnout. We're up to 86% at this point. This is a very cosmopolitan community, many languages spoken. Among those voting, and over here, he's standing by what they call the selfie wall for people who vote for the first time. Lots of first-time voters, including Abdel Hafid, who is originally from Morocco, U.S. citizen since 2014. How did it feel voting for the first time?
Yeah, first time. I'm Abdel Hafid. I'm originally from Morocco. I became a citizenship since 2014. I feel happy. I'm voting today because we want to keep America for all religions, for all cultures, for all races, for all people. So this is America we love, and this is America we want for our kids and for us and for our future.
Would you have been as motivated to vote if there hadn't been this toxic message on the campaign trail, or is this something that really motivated you to come out here and vote?
Yeah, that is something. It's really I want to vote for this reason because I mean this is the first time we have a candidate that is against certain race and certain religion. So that's why I am here.
Abdelhafid, congratulations, first-time voter, 38 years old. Many thanks. So there you see it, lots of first-time voters enthused, motivated from what you heard there to vote against a candidate. Of course, it depends what district you're in Virginia. It's a large state. The northern parts near Washington, D.C., much more voting Democratic. Southern parts, much more Republican country. So we're going to have to wait until that turnout. And one of the other things that's amazing about this 86% turnout is you can see over here, we're 30 minutes from the end. There's not many people at the door. 8 years ago, one assessor was telling us there were long lines out the door. People got discouraged and went away. We're going to ask more now about this. Maybe we can interrupt the elections chief who is over here. Socorrito, do you have a minute for us? So we're gonna sneak over here and say hello to Socorrito Baez-Page. She is the elections chief. Yeah, we were one of your supervisors was telling us that 8 years ago there were lines out the door, and this time there aren't, and yet you've got this 86% turnout. What's the difference?
Well, we have more early voters this time, absentee voters who came in and voted in person over at the government center, so they didn't have to stand in line here. But also we have a different check-in machine that allows us to check people in quicker and more accurately. It eliminates some of the having to look up names and things because the machine helps us do that, so we can sign the people in faster and get them in line to actually vote, because that part still takes the same amount of time no matter how you check them in, but we are actually moving them into the space and through the process faster than we did before. Now,
what did you expect when you woke up this morning you would be at 86% turnout?
I was hoping we'd get better than that. This is a very politically active community, and so I was looking out for all the people that we see every year and to come in. So I'm pleased.
And just very briefly, because we see this stark contrast, right, between this bitterness in the presidential race, and here the congeniality and the way people are civic-minded when it comes to local issues. Do you feel that there's a stark contrast between what's going on in Washington, what's going on locally?
Well, I think that, this community is very diverse, and people have just had to learn to get along and meet their neighbors and know more about each other. And so I think they can agree to disagree on things, but they come together on issues. The presidency is important, but what the day-to-day things that make your life complicated happen at the local level. And I think everybody here is pretty much aware that you have to work at the local level to improve your community, and the president sort of supports that, but it's not really the other way around. The president can't come down and say, you need to have better roads or you need to have lower taxes and all. That's a federal thing, and that's the smallest part of our daily lives. Our daily lives are local taxes, local schools, local representation, and that's what people work for here.
Socorrito Baez-Page, many thanks for your time. I know you're still got your day's not over yet, and in fact we can, Chris, just take a look over here, if you will, at the clock. 24 minutes to go before polls close here in Virginia, and again a record turnout in this polling station.
Thanks very much, Francois. And Virginia is one of several states which the pundits will be keeping a beady eye on. Florida, Ohio, Pennsylvania. Others, a failure to perform in some of those states. North Carolina is another one for Donald Trump. Could mean curtains pretty early on in the evening. France 24's Luke Brown takes a look through the key battlegrounds in this election.
Just an ordinary day on the campaign trail. Both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump on the stump in Florida. The Sunshine State is at the heart of the 2016 election. It's one of the so-called swing states that will decide the outcome. To reach the White House, a candidate needs a majority of the Electoral College. That means at least 270 of the 538 state electors that are spread unevenly around the 50 states. Heavily populated states are more valuable, handing inordinate influence to the few major states that are still up for grabs. In all, around a dozen out of the 50 states will really count. Prime amongst them, Pennsylvania with 20 electoral votes. With its split between urban voters and Rust Belt regions, it encapsulates much of America in the 21st century. North Carolina is a must-win for Trump, and its recent racial tensions could be decisive. And Ohio, with 18 votes, is a key bellwether state. It's chosen the winner since 1964. But the biggest prize of all is Florida, with its 29 electoral votes. The state's diverse community, as well as the large number of independents, make it hard to predict. In 2000, Florida was decisive. Out of the almost 6 million ballots cast, Al Gore lost by less than 600 votes, handing the state and the keys to the White House to George W. Bush. But 2016 is a race unlike almost any other, with once safe states like Arizona brought back into play. The scale of that shift in the electoral landscape will decide who'll be the next occupant of the Oval Office.
Saw the key states there and the changing makeup of some of those key states. We'll talk a little bit more about identity in a short while. We were talking just now about the divisions in the United States. I'd like to bring Ronald Freeman back in over that. Of course, one of the divisions we haven't mentioned yet is economics.
Indeed. There's a lot of economic division. There has been barely 4% increase in salaries of workers out on the shop floor over the 8 years of Obama's reign. 4% in 8 years is not much. The workers have really been shortchanged, and this is something that must change. There's a need for a really deep analysis of how the corporate pie, the profit pie, is divided between senior management, whose salaries have been doing very well, shareholders, and workers. And the workers will get a better shake from Hillary Clinton than they will from Donald Trump.
It's good. You say Hillary Clinton, but is either party really offering significant progress on that front?
The Democrats traditionally have been more labor-oriented and closer to the unions. So in that regard, I'd say yes.
That's not what Donald Trump says about Hillary Clinton.
He goes the other way. He doesn't like unions.
Okay, what can the Democrats do to try and I'm looking ahead of this election, whether they win or lose, to win back people who naturally should be their supporters?
Well, of course, it doesn't depend only on the president. She needs to have support in the Congress. And unless there's a meaningful swing in the House of Representatives and the Senate to the Democratic side, Hillary Clinton, if she's the winner of the presidential election, will have as much difficulty as Obama and Bill Clinton had in trying to get the Congress to enact any of their legislative program. That's a real problem, particularly when immigration is such a hot subject. They will need to have younger workers. Angela Merkel is known worldwide for having opened the door to Germany. Why did she do this? It wasn't out of the goodness of her heart. The average age of the average German is now 47 years old. In France, it's 41. In the United States, it's 37. The rich countries are getting older. They need younger, skilled immigrants to come into their country to maintain their workforce. This is something the Democrats are much more focused on than the Republicans.
Thanks, Ronald Freeman. We're going to bring back in Caroline Rolland-Diamond, historian, and author of Black America, A History of Struggles for Justice and Equality. How important are issues of identity in US elections?
It's extremely important. We just saw the little news bit about the amazing record turnout in that county, and it's really fueled by identity. There's a major stake of this election, in addition to the African American turnout, is really the Hispanic turnout, and identity is a crucial driver of their mobilization. And of course, again, they're also mobilizing against the very negative series of comments that Donald Trump made throughout the campaign against them. So there is definitely a major driver of the election. It is this identity question. We're going to see, I think, the Hispanic vote is going to be, in my sense, massive, and it's going to basically probably but there's a good chance it's going to bring over Florida to the Democratic side. We'll see if I'm right or wrong in this little guessing game. But it is definitely a major issue here.
Yeah, you were saying earlier when we were talking about racial divisions in the US that you were actually pessimistic about the way things are going, regardless of Trump and his supporters' rhetoric. In the end, this is a demographic issue. Why are you pessimistic?
Well, I'm pessimistic about what's going to happen next, and the divide is extremely deep, as we said, and my pessimism is also based on this issue that Mr. Freeman just mentioned, is what's going to happen in Congress. If Congress doesn't swing to the Democratic side, I don't think the House is going to swing, but there's a good chance the Senate is going to go towards the Democratic side. If this doesn't happen, Hillary Clinton won't be able to do anything. And considering the state of racial divisions in America today, she would definitely need, if she wins, to be able to conduct some very strong, massive social policies to try to address this issue of racial divide in the nation. And that requires strong social actions to try to attack not only poverty, that from which also suffer minorities, but more specifically racial inequalities. So Hillary Clinton, throughout the campaign, somewhat belatedly has addressed these issues of racial inequalities. She has come out denouncing police violence against African Americans. She has come out in favor of the reform of the justice system. So she has made a few gestures in that direction, but we need to see what's going to come out of this election, and especially in Congress, to see if these gestures are going to be able to be followed suit by some actions.
Corinne, thanks. Voting winding up in several states now. It's a poll set to close in various parts of the east of the country in the next hour or so. It was a day of voting led by the two candidates. France 24's Luke Schrago takes a look back.
Turning out to vote near her home in New York State, Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton spoke of the weight resting on her shoulders.
It is the most humbling feeling, Dan, because, I know how much responsibility goes with this, and so many people are counting on the outcome of this election, what it means for our country, and I'll do the very best I can if I'm fortunate enough to win today.
Elsewhere, Clinton's running mate Senator Tim Kaine was casting his ballot too. He spoke of the US public's anxiety over the economy and how it would have to be the next administration's main focus.
There are an awful lot of people in the country who still don't see the path for themselves. And I think that is the principal concern that we have to speak to, not just to win over people who might not be supporters, but we got to speak to it to make sure that this country continues to hold a promise that tomorrow's generation can have it better than their parents did.
Over in New York City, far less of the trademark bombast Donald Trump's campaign has been known for. The Republican presidential nominee was booed as he arrived to vote. Trump said little as he cast his ballot, though expressed optimism. The business mogul's running mate and governor of Indiana went further, reminding supporters there was more than one vote underway.
With renewed Republican majorities in the House and in the Senate, I'm very confident that a President Donald Trump will have the partners that we need to rebuild our military, revive our economy, and set our nation on a pathway where we can once again have government as good as our people.
The American people, though, have been torn apart over the last 18 months by the most divisive election in US history. It seems whoever takes the White House will have their work cut out, trying to reunite the nation moving forward.
That's an election whose vitriol has perhaps attracted more attention around the world than any other in the recent past. But as the US's allies and foes await the result with bated breath, it comes at the end of a campaign in which foreign policy has often been conspicuous by its absence. Once in office, the new president will face a host of pressing challenges from Russia and China on the diplomatic front to the conflict in Syria on the military front. Hillary Clinton aiming to become the first Secretary of State to rise to take the White House is James Buchanan back in 1857. Now, This should mean that foreign policy is her strong point, but some opponents say it's Achilles' heel, as Luke Brown explains.
As soon as he travels to 112 countries and negotiates a peace deal, a ceasefire, he can talk to me about stamina.
When it comes to foreign policy, Hillary Clinton's prime strength is the prominent role she's already played on the world stage, serving as Barack Obama's Secretary of State. A cornerstone of their efforts, the pivot towards Asia, in a bid to both contain the rise of China as well as foster alliances with other regional powers. Her 4 globe-trotting years burnishing Clinton's reputation for tireless diplomacy as she worked to shore up America's international alliances. And having seen relations with Israel deteriorate under Obama, Clinton seeking to build bridges, underlining her 2 decades of close relations with Israeli governments. But her time in office also exposed Clinton to criticism for certain mistakes, like the death of the US ambassador to Libya, Chris Stevens, in Benghazi in 2012.
The fact is, we had 4 dead Americans. Was it because of a protest, or was it because of guys out for a walk one night who decided they'd go kill some Americans? What difference at this point does it make? It is our job to figure out what happened and do everything we can to prevent it from ever happening again.
Russia, too, is likely to prove a testing adversary on the world stage for the next president. In 2009, Obama and Clinton attempted to reset relations with Moscow, but that thaw proved short-lived, as ties with the Kremlin have deteriorated thanks to irreconcilable differences emerging over the Syrian and Ukrainian conflicts. Now Clinton vowing to stand up to Vladimir Putin.
Russia has decided that it's all in Syria, and they've also decided who they want to see become president of the United States, too, and it's not me. I've stood up to Russia, I've taken on Putin and others, and I would do that as president.
Indeed, Clinton has adopted a more hawkish stance than Barack Obama. She initially backed the Iraq war in 2002 and called for a bigger troop presence in Iraq and Afghanistan. Clinton also pushing for sanctions against Iran while in office and now arguing for a greater intervention in Syria.
And I think
those hawkish stances often tempered by diplomatic necessity. Her backers call it pragmatism, her critics call it opportunism. If elected to the White House, with the US involved in military operations in Iraq and Syria, her nerve and decision-making will be tested from day one.
For more, I'm joined by Leo Pisa, who's a security advisor to former US President Bill Clinton. Thanks very much for talking to us. Whoever's president, there's no shortage of challenges right now. What would each candidate bring to the table?
What would each candidate bring to the table? Well, you're asking someone who supports Mrs. Clinton. So I know that she will bring, if she is elected, a tremendous amount of experience, of wisdom, of know-how, of decision-making, and what will probably be a very precious thing, an ability to work across the aisle with Congress, because whoever the president is going to need to mend some of the divisions that have erupted in this country over the last several months.
Should Hillary Clinton win, do you expect her to be more hawkish than her predecessor?
I expect her to deal with problems hands-on. I don't know if hawkish is the term. You know, it depends on the topic. But she has been Secretary of State. She has served on the Senate Armed Forces Committee, so she will not be afraid of flexing America's muscle, but in a way that she has described as smart power, which is combining strength with wisdom and opening toward the world and toward our alliances, which she deems to be vital.
There is an argument made by some of America's rivals, but also some of those on the Western populist right and, if you want, populist left, that Hillary Clinton poses a much greater threat to world peace than Donald Trump. How would you react to that?
I don't know who would make such arguments. If these are things coming out of Russia, well, then that's the banter that seems to be going on between the Trump camp and the Putin camp. What Hillary Clinton stands for is an opening on the world, a multilateral world, an understanding of the issues that are so vital today that pose grave dangers. Some of them pose opportunities, but there's some really serious stuff at stake, and she grasps those issues. And if she is president, I think she will handle them with great intelligence.
Do you seriously buy the argument that Mr. Trump is in bed with the Russians?
I would never use such a term, though I might. I absolutely buy the argument that there is some strange kind of a romance, whether the imaginary or real, going on between Mr. Trump and Mr. Putin. Absolutely.
Leah Pissarro, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks also to our studio guests, the economist Ronald Freeman and author Caroline Rolland-Diamond. Thanks for coming in. Laura Sellier will be with you very shortly to continue this special US election coverage here on France 24. For that, it's focused, and in this edition we'll be heading to a US state that's grown in prominence on the road to the White House. Few places have gone through such rapid political changes as Colorado. Historically, a Republican bastion, it voted Democrat in the last two presidential elections. An increase in the Hispanic population and an influx of educated young people have shaken up the demographics, but voting intentions remain hard to pin down. This report from our correspondents Valérie Defer, Louis Piala and Naib Reynoso.
I hereby declare on oath.
Raising her right hand, Bridget Hefner, a native of Mexico,
That I absolutely and entirely
is taking an oath of allegiance
renounce and adore
and becoming a U.S. citizen.
So help me God. Congratulations, you are now.
It's, it's a moment that I've been waiting 10 years for. 10 years, finally here.
In Colorado, the number of people applying to become naturalized citizens has increased by 20% during this electoral year. The majority of these new citizens who will become new voters are Hispanics, who statistically vote in favor of the Democratic Party.
I am proud to welcome you as a new citizen of this country.
Bridget Hefner chose to become a citizen so her voice could be heard.
When Mr. Trump started speaking bad about Latinos, that's when I make my big decision and say, I'm going to become a citizen. I have to vote against him.
You look very emotional about it.
It makes me sad to see how low we are, how I mean, separate everybody just by the color of the skin, by the way I look. I am not rapist, Donald Trump. I am Mexican, I'm a hardworking woman, and today I become a citizen and I'm going to vote against you.
Latinos represent 21% of the population in Colorado, a key ethnic voting bloc that keeps growing in size. Colorado, but mainly Denver, attracts a younger and more educated demographic. Most of them were attracted to the outdoor lifestyle, but also by the opportunity to be involved in a new growing business, cannabis, which has been legal in this state since 2014. Like this startup where they build software for marijuana dispensaries.
This is our accounting room. That's my co-founder right there. That's Chase. We've known each other since we were little kids, and we can show policymakers that we can legalize cannabis responsibly. We can track these products and keep people safe. And I mean, there's the right way to do this. And it's all starting here in Colorado. It's wild.
Kyle left California 3 years ago to come build his company in Denver.
We've always been a purple state. I think it's becoming more liberal now. You have so many millennials coming in who agree with legalization, who see us as this pioneer. And they're bringing their political values with them. I think Hillary's probably a stronger choice for legalization efforts.
Voters between the age of 18 and 35 years old, also called millennials, will decide the outcome of the election. But they are not supporting Hillary Clinton blindly.